The wind howled across the dusty plains, carrying the scent of sagebrush and the distant echo of cattle hooves. Clara tightened her shawl around her shoulders, her eyes scanning the horizon where the sun bled into shades of orange and crimson. Her father's farm had been lost to debt, leaving her alone in a town that whispered of broken dreams. Each step she took felt heavier than the last, the weight of hopelessness pressing down on her chest, making even the smallest task feel monumental. Clara entered the town's only inn, its wooden sign creaking on rusted hinges. Inside, the warmth of the fire contrasted sharply with the chill of her despair. Townsfolk glanced at her with polite curiosity, but none offered help. Her stomach knotted as she approached the counter, realizing the coins in her hand barely covered a loaf of bread. She felt the sting of judgment, the silent reminder that misfortune was a mark worn visibly in this harsh land. Outside, a lone rider approached, dust trailing behind his horse. His hat shadowed his face, but there was a calm confidence in his stride. The town seemed to hold its breath as he dismounted, his boots echoing on the wooden planks. Clara watched from the doorway, heart pounding, not from fear, but a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in weeks. The rider's presence was magnetic, as if the frontier itself had chosen him to cross paths with her in this lonely town. "Name's Jack," he said, tipping his hat as he noticed her staring. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of someone who had weathered storms yet remained unbroken. Clara's lips parted, unsure whether to speak or retreat. She felt the pull of fate, a sudden, inexplicable certainty that this man's arrival would change the course of her fragile life. Jack's eyes scanned the inn briefly before resting again on her, patient and unwavering, as if he already understood her story without a single word. The innkeeper coughed, breaking the tension. "Room for the night?" Jack asked. The innkeeper nodded, leading him to a small, sparsely furnished room. Clara lingered near the doorway, torn between retreating to her solitude and seeking the courage to speak. Jack noticed her hesitation. "Don't worry," he said softly, "sometimes strangers can be friends when the world feels too heavy." Clara's heart wavered, hope and fear colliding in a delicate dance. Night fell swiftly, painting the town in deep blues and silvers. Clara sat by the fire, mending a torn dress, when a sudden knock startled her. Jack entered, holding a small parcel of bread and cheese. "Thought you might need this," he said. She accepted it silently, eyes misting as gratitude and disbelief mingled. In that simple act, trust began to bridge the chasm of loneliness, hinting that even in the harsh frontier, kindness could flourish where it was least expected. Days passed, and Jack and Clara grew accustomed to each other's presence. He shared tales of distant ranches, of stampedes that shook the earth, of nights under endless starry skies. Clara listened, her laughter tentative at first, then more freely, the sound mingling with the wind that swept through the town. She began to forget, if only briefly, the weight of her loss. Jack's presence became a steady pulse in her life, a reminder that even in desolation, connection could root itself. One morning, the town awoke to chaos. A group of outlaws had ridden in, demanding supplies and coin. Windows shattered, horses reared, and fear gripped every heart. Clara clutched her shawl, trembling, unsure how to face the threat. Jack stepped forward, calm and resolute, his hand hovering near his revolver. The air crackled with tension, a showdown inevitable. Clara realized that survival in the frontier required courage she had never imagined herself possessing. Jack faced the outlaws, his voice firm. "Leave the town, and no one gets hurt." The leader sneered, but Jack's unwavering gaze held something they did not anticipate: quiet strength. Shots rang, dust and smoke filled the air, and in the midst of chaos, Clara found herself running to help the wounded townsfolk. Fear threatened to paralyze her, yet Jack's steady presence reminded her that bravery could take many forms, and even the smallest acts mattered. By nightfall, the outlaws had fled, leaving the town battered but alive. Clara tended to the injured, her hands trembling yet determined. Jack approached, wiping sweat and dust from his brow. "You were incredible today," he said. Her cheeks flushed, not from pride, but the realization that she had discovered a strength she never knew existed. In that fleeting moment, the bond between them deepened, forged not in comfort but in fire and shared endurance. The following weeks brought a fragile peace. Jack and Clara worked together to rebuild the inn and the town's damaged homes. Neighbors watched, inspired by their courage and unity. Slowly, smiles returned, laughter echoed in the streets, and the frontier's harshness softened under the weight of human resilience. Clara felt the stirrings of hope, a quiet certainty that perhaps, in this wild land, a future awaited her that was not defined by loss, but by choice, courage, and companionship. Spring arrived slowly, brushing the plains with new green and warming winds. Clara found herself walking beside Jack as they tended to a nearby herd. The sound of hooves on soft earth, the whisper of grass in the breeze, created a rhythm that felt like life itself had returned. Yet, beneath the calm, Clara sensed unease. Rumors of more outlaws circulated, and the town's fragile peace seemed a delicate thread, easily broken. One afternoon, as Clara fetched water from the river, a rider appeared, carrying a message bound in leather. Her hands shook as she opened it. The outlaws had regrouped and were planning another raid. Fear clawed at her, but she steeled herself, knowing Jack would never let them face danger alone. The frontier had taught her that courage was not absence of fear, but moving forward despite it. Jack gathered the townsfolk that evening. Faces pale in the firelight, they listened as he spoke calmly but firmly. "We fight together or we fall alone. This town survives because of us, not in spite of us." Clara watched, heart swelling, as men and women who had once cowered now stood taller, emboldened by Jack's resolve. In that moment, she understood that true leadership was quiet strength, and Jack had it in abundance. The night of the attack arrived with a storm, rain lashing the wooden buildings, lightning splitting the sky. Clara and Jack moved through the town like shadows, guiding families to safety and barricading the inn. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the valleys, mingling with thunder. Clara's pulse pounded, fear and determination interlacing, yet Jack's presence beside her grounded her, his calm touch a lifeline in the storm of chaos. During a particularly fierce skirmish, Jack was pinned behind a fallen beam, a bullet grazing his shoulder. Clara's scream pierced the night as she dashed to him, lifting him with desperate strength. "You can't leave me here," she cried, tears mixing with rain. Jack smiled faintly, blood streaking his cheek. "Not without you," he whispered, a flicker of humor hiding the pain. In that instant, the harsh frontier transformed into something intimate, a world where life and love collided amidst the danger. With the townsfolk united, they pushed back the outlaws. Clara found herself disarming a young gunman, her hands steady despite adrenaline and fear. The outlaws, leader, enraged by resistance, faced Jack directly. Time seemed to stretch as they stared each other down, revolvers drawn. Then, with precise calm, Jack outmaneuvered him, sending him fleeing into the stormy night. Victory, hard-won and bloody, settled over the town. Dawn broke, casting a golden light over the wet, battered town. Clara and Jack surveyed the damage, exhaustion heavy on their shoulders. Yet, among the ruins, there was life, children laughing amid splintered boards, neighbors tending fires together, a community forged in fire and rain. Clara felt the weight of despair lift from her chest, replaced by a burgeoning sense of belonging she had never known. Weeks passed, and the town slowly healed. Jack and Clara rebuilt homes, planted fields, and reopened the inn. Laughter became common again, and the frontier, once a place of despair, bloomed with resilience and hope. Clara discovered joy in small victories, a loaf of bread rising in the oven, the first green shoots in the fields, the quiet moments shared with Jack beneath star-strewn skies. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the plains with crimson, Jack took Clara's hand. "I've seen the worst this land can offer," he said softly, "but I've also found its best, with you." Clara's eyes glistened with tears, a smile breaking through the dust and sweat. "And I've found courage I didn't know I had," she whispered. Their hands intertwined, the hardships behind them, the promise of tomorrow stretching endless and bright across the horizon. The townsfolk celebrated the town's resilience with a festival, music and laughter filling the air. Clara danced in the square, Jack at her side, both of them bathed in firelight and the warmth of a community reborn. The frontier's dangers had forged something stronger than fear, love, trust, and an unshakable sense of home. Clara realized she no longer feared the future, she welcomed it, ready to build a life with Jack in a town that had become her family. Months turned into years. The town flourished under the leadership of Jack and the care of Clara, now regarded as pillars of their community. New settlers arrived, drawn by tales of resilience and courage. Clara watched children play in the fields once barren, their laughter echoing across the plains. She held Jack's hand tightly, knowing that together they had transformed the frontier from a place of despair into a sanctuary of hope. On a quiet evening, with stars sparkling like scattered diamonds, Jack led Clara to the hill overlooking the town. "This is ours," he said, voice full of warmth. "All of it, the struggles, the victories, the life we've built." Clara leaned into him, heart full, the frontier no longer a wild, unforgiving place, but a canvas where they had painted love, courage, and the promise of tomorrow. They married under the vast sky, the plains stretching infinitely behind them. Friends and neighbors celebrated, laughter mingling with the soft sigh of the wind. The hardships they had endured only strengthened their bond, and in each other, they found not just love, but a partner who could weather any storm, face any danger, and still stand unbroken. Jack and Clara's legacy endured through stories passed down, tales of bravery, compassion, and unity. Travelers spoke of the town that rose from despair, of a woman who found courage, and a cowboy whose quiet strength became legend. Their love story became intertwined with the land itself, a beacon to those who ventured into the frontier, proving that even in the harshest wilderness, the human heart could flourish. Years later, Clara watched the sunset with Jack by her side. Their hair grayed, faces lined with experience, yet their spirits remained young. Children ran across the fields they had once fought to protect, and laughter carried on the wind. Clara felt the deep satisfaction of a life hard won, rich with love, and full of purpose. The frontier had tested them, shaped them, and ultimately gifted them a life beyond imagination. And so, the plains whispered their names, Clara and Jack, the heart of a town reborn. The wind carried tales of courage, of a woman who would not surrender, and a cowboy whose steadfast hand reached out in the darkest hours. Together, they had conquered fear, rebuilt hope, and found happiness in a land that demanded resilience. The frontier, once a place of despair, had become their forever home.